Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this international YPN webinar. We are so happy that you can make it. And so my name is Paul Singh. I'm the chair of the YPN Caribbean branch, and I have been a member of the Energy Institute for approximately 5 years, the majority of which I've been a student member, and recently I transitioned to an associate member. And I'm currently working as a project assistant at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago. And so joining me today, I have the YPN Nigeria chair, Calvin Numa, who is working in the background, making sure that all of the logistics run smoothly. And our panelists, Sanedo Beng, Mervin, Azeta, and Shane Wilson. So as a lot of you may be aware, the energy industry is undergoing a grand transformation in response to our climate emergency. And this will fundamentally change the energy industry's approach to managing energy and reducing carbon emissions to achieve net zero by 2050. This shift in the energy industry's paradigm also means a similar transformation for the future workforce. And so our webinar today will address this topic. The workforce of the future. How can young professionals align themselves with the energy transition? And so this webinar flies under the banner Generation 2050, which is a new initiative by the Energy Institute and its YPNs. And you'll hear a little bit about that shortly. But first, the format of this session will be as follows. We'll have some polls, which will come after each speaker. We'll have an introduction to the Energy Institute and Generation 2050 by Sanedo Beng. We'll have Mervin Azeta, who will speak a little bit about the approach that young professionals can take to the energy transition. And then we'll have Shane, who will share a bit of the skills development for the workforce of the future. And so I'll pass on to Saneed. Saneed serves as the YP Council Chair and also on the Board of Trustees for the Energy Institute. And by profession, she works as a regulatory affairs advisor for Gazprom Marketing and Trading. And so now I'll pass on to Sinead. Sinead, you can take it.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Paul, and welcome everyone to what is our third YPN International webinar and our second installment of Generation 2050, as Paul already said. So I am going to, thanks, I see the slide is there. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Energy Institute for those of you that are new to the EI. And I'm also going to tell you a bit more about Generation 2050. So as you can see on the slide, the Energy Institute is an international professional body. It provides learning and networking opportunities, support for professional development, as well as professional recognition for technical and scientific knowledge and resources, but also it's a lot broader than that. And where the young professionals sit is they sit as a series of international branches based in places like Nigeria and the Caribbean, as you can see, but also in the UK. We have branches in the South, in London, in Ireland, in the Northeast, and you know we're planning on expanding, so it's not limited there. We also have quite a strong presence in the Middle East as well, and in Far East Asia. So it's a big network and it's a great thing to be a part of. So we normally define a young professional as someone that has less than 10 years experience or you know, feels to be a young professional or is new to the industry. So that's especially why these kind of discussions are so important. As Paul rightly said, our industry is going through a massive change at the moment. That's really exciting, but also a little bit intimidating. And as much as this big change is exciting, we're still learning about it. We're still learning about the best ways to achieve net zero and the best ways to achieve climate targets by 2050. So this is where Generation 2050 comes in. Next slide, please. So while that's coming up, Generation 2050 is a project that's been initiated by the EI and its global young professional networks. It has 3 key aims. The first is to distill and amplify a positive vision for change in response to urgent global challenges. The second is to convey to today's energy leaders the views and opinions of those, i.e. ourselves, that will actually inherit the sector and the planet after them, and will probably be made accountable for the progression we've made between now and 2050. So we may as well have a voice. And the third is to inspire young professionals and young people to stay in the sector and also to encourage others to join it. So at the heart of Generation 2050 is a survey, and that's already launched. It's closing in about 3 weeks, I believe. And that survey is a great opportunity to capture your views, also capture the views of your peers. So it's going to pop up at the end of this webinar. So when you see it, please respond to the survey. It's so important. We've already got a whopping 600 responses, which is going to be really weighty when we're trying to present our views as young professionals to our policymakers. So please do input, please do share with your contacts, your networks, and continue to be a part of this really interesting discussion. And also, there are a couple of points about the other things that will feature in the Generation 2050 program. So there'll be certain features in the podcast, Energy in Conversation, which is an Energy Institute podcast that's already running. So the next series will have a couple of episodes that will really hone down on these Generation 2050 and these climate themes. So look out for that. And we also plan to have some interaction with COP26, provide some views in the lead up. There'll also be a social media campaign that's following on from this, and there'll be more. We're still, producing lots of outputs out of this program, and we want it to be as big as possible. So if your company or another organization is interested in being a part of it, do let us know at the end of the webinar. So that's everything from me, and I'll hand back to Paul.
Thank you so much for that, Sinead. And so just to add, this is such a great opportunity for young professionals to get behind and to contribute to, if it is they want to have a direct impact on the future that we ourselves are going to be a part of. And so to kick things off, we're going to have our first poll. And so it should pop up on your screens. Yeah. So the question is, top 10 skills for the future workforce. Which of them do you already have? And so we're going to give you about a minute to put in your responses, and then we can have a look at the results. So okay, so here are our results. And so we have quite a variety of responses. And so it's very clear that if it is we want to develop a workforce for the future that can take on all of the challenges that we would face, we definitely need our workforce to be very diverse. And for most persons, at least containing several of these skill sets that we can see here. So now we'll move on And okay, so before we move on, I'd just like you all to remember that, or note rather, that we have a Q&A box. And so as the discussions are going on, you can post your questions. And then at the end of the session, when our speakers have finished, we would address your questions. Okay, so, so let's begin the discussion. Our first speaker is Mervin Azeta. She's from Nigeria, and she's an award-winning Nigerian energy professional, intersectional advocate, and multi-talented engineer and presidential scholar. She's keenly passionate about energy access, sustainable development, gender equality, youth engagement, and cultivating the next generation of female scientists, technologists, engineers, mathematicians, and transformative leaders. So I'll hand across to Mervin. Welcome, Mervin.
Thank you so much, Paul, for the introduction. And thanks to Sinead, the Energy Institute, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to speak to young professionals from across the globe. I think this is a very useful conversation, and it's something that we need to keep going as we go along in the energy transition. So let me just dive straight into the conversation today. It's clear that the world, and particularly the energy sector, is on a journey to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We've heard that from Sinead and Paul in the introduction. We've also recently heard the big oil and gas companies commit to significant emissions reduction over the next 5 to 10 years and in the decades to come. We know that these targets are consistent with the Paris Agreement and IPCC recommendations. We also know that driven by factors like government policies, public opinion, investor interest, the new wave of digitization, which is called Industry 4.0, and of course, the economics of renewables, these companies are racing to adopt integrated business models, digitize their operations to improve operational efficiency, and invest in sustainable technologies and ventures. We've had Total, for example, buying over some solar companies. We've also had Shell doing similar stuff. And Schlumberger as well is investing in renewable technologies like geothermal, as well as some other sustainable technologies and ventures. I'd like to reiterate the fact that I did not particularly mention just renewables, because I think that sometimes we tend to be carried away by the renewable hype, and then we miss out on the realities like the need for conventional energy sources continuously in the next few years and even decade. So we must keep that in mind when we're having these conversations and not just stick our thoughts on renewables alone. It's also important to note that beyond tackling climate change or reducing the effect of greenhouse gases, these companies and the industry in general has a responsibility of ensuring that the increasing demand for energy, for goods and services by billions across the globe are met in the most cost-effective and sustainable way. To give you a clearer picture of what's happening in these companies, I thought I might share a few things about Schlumberger. It became the first E&P company to commit to a science-based target in December 2019. And since then, he's sought to lead positive, measurable changes in greenhouse gas emissions and sustainability within the industry. It's sensitized its employees about the energy transition, it's merged some innovations from tech giants like Microsoft with oil field technologies. It's redesigned some of the technologies that we use for drilling, completion, and production. It's upgraded our buildings and facilities to reduce its carbon footprint. But whilst retaining its core business, innovating and restructuring to capture the opportunities of the fourth industrial revolution, it's also created the new energy organization that explores strategic investments in startups and ventures with potential for new energy technology development, adjacent businesses that capitalize on its expertise and experience in the oil and gas sector. And then it's also developed other deployments focusing on new domains and associated business opportunities We recently launched some advanced technologies like the Gaia platform that has massive transformative effects for many beyond the energy industry. So all of these changes happening within the companies, within Schlumberger, with Shell, with Total, with BP, are obviously creating more opportunities to engineer and operate better technologies, to maintain and upgrade the existing solutions and even the current digital infrastructure that's being built, so that they can help the companies achieve the agility, efficiency, and scale required across their businesses and operations, but more importantly, to outperform in the marketplace as well as deliver the greatest value to all stakeholders, both today and for the next 30 years. So back to the industry. To deliver on the ambitions that we have heard so far, Shell is saying they're going to reduce their carbon footprint by maybe 35% by 2025 and stuff like that. We know that they cannot achieve this without necessarily having the right people in place. So to accelerate the energy transition and the transformation to a cleaner, secure and safe future for all of us, whilst retaining their social license to operate, the industry would need to attract the right people with the right enthusiasm, with the right knowledge, with the right skills. They would need to attract talents who can help reimagine, design, and develop the creative solutions that will build the resilient and sustainable global energy system that we look forward to having. So young professionals, millennials, Gen Zs would be expected to evolve and adapt to this new operating landscape and help these companies decarbonize to reach net zero. So how do we do that? And that's obviously the focus of today's conversation, right? So the first thing I have on my list out of 3 things that I would like us to take away from this conversation is that 1, we need to understand the changes happening across the industry, and not just looking at oil and gas alone, but looking at the different segments of the industry. So in terms of electricity or power generation, in terms of communication, in terms of transport, especially long haul transport, buildings, heavy duty factories and industries. So we need to look at all of those, try to understand what changes are happening across these different segments of the industry. But it's also important that you approach this exercise, with a mindset that seeks to contribute value as you become part of the ecosystem. If you're in this meeting today, I'm sure you're interested in the energy industry, you want to play a part in it. So it's important that you understand the changes happening, and then obviously approach the exercise with a mindset that seeks to contribute value. We don't need people who would just come in and be brilliant jacks. We need people who would bring, value to the industry, create the changes that we want to see, contribute to the innovation that we're looking to have. So it's important as well that you keep in mind the fact that there is so much room to innovate, both technologically and otherwise, than there's ever been before. And there's also an opportunity to thrive beyond how we've known success in the industry prior to today or prior to the next few years. So take advantage of the opportunity to understand what's happening and be willing to play a part in it. The second point I'd like us to take away is the fact that we must take actions to reskill, upskill, and engage meaningfully as well as productively. It's important that you develop a diversified and balanced skill set. We've seen a few of the skills that we think we require for the future. And more than just having the technical skills, STEM disciplines like engineering, you also need to have social skills, you need to have digital skills. And how do you develop such balanced skill set is by taking on cross-border, cross-functional projects within and outside your company or the segment of the industry where you're working today. So if, for example, I'm working oil and gas, I can afford to take courses in some other segments like buildings, like construction management, in terms of understanding how sustainable buildings are developed or constructed. I would like to take courses in transport to understand how we develop fuel cells to power the cars that we will need for the future. So broaden your scope of skills that you can have technically, but also in terms of social skills, develop emotional intelligence. We saw that on the list of the skills in the poll. You also want to take up value-adding projects, be a part of projects that are happening, join some organization that is looking at, the energy transition, and try to support some of the initiatives that they're developing, be part of that. Explore new learning opportunities, take courses in AI, data analytics. I'm currently taking a course in data analytics. I started Python a few months back, and just take courses in these things. Advanced manufacturing, we would need people to fabricate the equipment that would be required for drilling for oil in some remote environments, deep offshore. We will need people to fabricate and manufacture the equipment that will be used for geothermal power. We will need people to develop the equipment or the infrastructure for carbon capture and storage. So try to take courses in some of these things and understand that there are other non-traditional engineering disciplines that will play a role in the energy transition. And then thirdly is the fact that you must use your voice and resources for good. You must call for actions on the path of others, including encouraging younger generation to pursue STEM disciplines. And I said earlier that STEM disciplines will be important because they will continue to be crucial to the energy transition and the future of the energy industry. We must lend our voices to initiatives like Generation 2050 and share what could potentially impact billions of people in the long run. You must also understand that this dialogue around the energy transition is not just for CEOs alone or for policymakers. It's also for you as young professionals. It's your future after all, so be part of the conversation. And remember, if super majors like Shell, BP, Total, and Schlumberger are equipping themselves for that future, moving from big oil and gas to big data and energy, then why wouldn't we? Thank you so much, and I'm happy to take questions later on.
Thank you, Mervin, for that inspirational speech. I definitely agree with you that innovation is key, and it's a key aspect in achieving and meeting our goals in reduction in carbon emissions and eventually achieving future energy security, which means reliable and affordable energy for all. And in order to be effective, we definitely need to acquire those relevant skills. And so this will take us to our second poll, which would also pop up now. And this poll will have two questions, at the end of which, when you give your responses, we will have the results shown again. Okay, so here we have our results. So yes, 100% of our poll participants stated that the energy transition it has a significant role in ensuring future generation. So that speaks volumes, right? And so which means that we need to give our best, put our best foot forward and put our best minds towards achieving the goals that we have put in place as an industry, and even as a society expects of us to act responsibly with respect to energy management, and even ourselves as it is we seek to ensure that future generations also have a comfortable standard of living, just like we have currently with the use of our conventional sources of energy. And again, we have a resounding both of the above. So all parties or stakeholders have a responsibility to contribute to this transition. And I think, as Mervin would have mentioned just now, that we need a little more collaboration between industry leaders and young professionals. So we need to make our opinions and our personal views known with respect to climate change and the energy transition, which is why also the survey that Sinead mentioned is so important in letting policymakers know what young professionals expect of them and the industry to move forward. So this will take us smoothly into the presentation by our next speaker, Shane, who will speak a little more of the skills development that are necessary to ensure that we have a competent workforce for the future. And so Shane is an associate member of the Energy Institute. His current designation is a commercial analyst for the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited. And his role there is in promoting low carbon and clean energy ventures. He has a cross-functional background that includes a BSc in Land Surveying and Information Systems from the University of the West Indies and an MSc in Energy Management with distinction, which he acquired from the Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen. He has 8 years, that's a typo, of experience in the energy industry working at the NGCTT with 6 years in geomatics and 2 years in commercial. And Shane also works as a part of an NGO called the Youth Government of Trinidad and Tobago, launching educational initiatives for stimulating youth professional development within the sector. And so I pass on to you now, Shane.
Hi, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on which part of the world you're from. Thank you for being with us. I'd like to thank the Energy Institute and the YPN branches, Caribbean and Nigeria, for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all this today. And I would like to, basically provide a perspective in terms of how young professionals could align themselves with the energy transition. Can we go in? Right. So within my first slide, what I wanted to focus on is why we need to develop a focus on skills development. And I utilize 3 images to kind of provide the themes I'm looking for to express the need as young professionals for aligning ourselves for the energy transition. The first one really shows how carbon emissions have been increasing. So even though within the past 5 years, we have had the COP21 agreement, you have the agreements concerning the mandates by countries committing to become more energy efficient and integrate more renewables into their systems. You have commitments in terms of government policies encouraging reductions on carbon emissions, and even though we have had a lot of advocacy globally, emissions have still been on a rise. If you look at it last year, you know, in 2019, we had the highest penetration for renewable energy, and emissions are still basically increased. And it presents to me as a young professional within the industry and understanding that there's still a big gap between the solutions required for helping the energy transition. As Sinead said, the energy transition is not just about, sorry, Mervin said, it's not just about renewables, but it's actually having the solutions, effective solutions to reduce our greenhouse gases and our carbon footprint. And, you know, and this graph really highlights, because, you know, climate change is a global issue. I live within the Caribbean and Latin American region. We're responsible for approximately under 10% of global emissions, but yet we have felt the brunt, especially during the hurricane season, you know, where we have actually witnessed hurricanes within the region of Category 5. Just to give you some perspective, in 2017, we experienced 2 Category 5 hurricanes, and that accumulated damages well over 100 billion for the countries within the region in terms of recovery. So, you know, as we go forward, definitely as young professionals, we have to be abreast, and because the threat of climate change is real. And as our emissions continue to increase, it is something that we have to be mindful of. Of course, due to COVID-19 and the restrictions that was imposed based on social distancing and lockdown orders, there was actually a switch where I guess liquid fuels were on the decline and therefore carbon emissions were on decline. So it is forecasted, but by the end of this year, you know, there should be an 8% decrease in terms of carbon emissions. But then it begs the question that COVID-19 really showed us as professionals the drastic changes are required really to create that atmosphere for helping the energy transition in terms of reducing our emissions. And it's something that we definitely have to take into consideration. Now, looking at the top issues, obviously, as economies grow and they require more energy, you know, there are a lot of global issues. And it's not a simple pull and plug situation where one situation, for instance, if just adding renewables to energy system will help the energy transition. Different territories will have different issues that will probably require unique solutions. And we have to understand what these issues are. The Global Energy Issues Chart really provides you an overview of what the World Energy Council, after their research, looked at as the top issues. And it creates that big picture for us as professionals, because we have to look at the big picture. You know, you want to introduce different technologies into a system that is already carbon locking. We have to understand, well, what is the switching cost? How it affects us long term? What is the social and what is the environmental and the access and affordability? Looking at the whole energy trilemma, and these are issues as young professionals we have to be aware of. I'm sure when they update their chart, the hydrogen economy will definitely be one of those action areas that they'll be looking at because of the recent buzz around hydrogen. But as a young professional, we have to be abreast. You know, you have to be aware of how commodities, energy subsidies could affect the integration and infiltration of clean energy systems, of energy efficiency, how it could affect behaviors. And as young professionals, you know, I think that is something that we have to look at. In terms of, and Mervin talked about it, you know, when we talk about technology over the last couple of years has advanced. It has reshaped how we interact with each other, how we interact with our day-to-day activities. And in the oil and gas industry, you have seen it for yourselves in terms of how technology has improved time, safety, and also asset management, from utilizing drones for inspections, cloud computing for providing access anywhere once you have a Wi-Fi and a tablet, even your phone. So obviously big data showing trends once the right data is inside, you know, and also looking at robotics, which have assisted with the whole concept of unmanned facilities. The idea as young professionals now is to how we can harness these learnings from our oil and gas industry that's transforming now into energy industry, as been discussed already, that because of how we've seen the move from the oil majors and most oil and gas companies shifting focus with climate change as a perspective, how we can utilize technology as well to help with that transition, because technology is going to play a critical role moving forward. And we as young professionals must be there. You know, when I want to bring up an example from when I was working in my time in under my GIS geomatics portfolio. It was a young professional who suggested why we don't use drones, why we can't use drones for unmanned mapping of areas. And you know, it was something that started from somebody who was an analyst. And it wasn't an idea that was from somebody from management. And in terms of cost savings, there were a lot of benefits the company achieved in terms of cost savings, building your own in-house skill set as well too. And they've reached a point now where they can even sell those skills. So it's something that as young professionals, we have to be mindful. The technology is out there. We have to figure out a way how we could utilize it within our own areas and to harness the most value from them. Next slide, please. Hello? Next slide. All right. So where we are, and I use the IEA's Sustainable Development Scenario Strategy to really paint a picture for us young professionals, because to reach that Sustainable Development Strategy of climate change goals by 2050, the IEA really painted a broad perspective of the different pathways required to get to that Sustainable Development Strategy. And you know, when you look at it, whether it's in energy efficiency, whether it's in renewables, carbon capture and utilization, fuel switching, we as young professionals have this opportunity now to look at these specific pathways and understand where we may have a passion, and we can see how we can help contribute that pathway in terms of playing a role in developing the energy transition long term. You know, in terms of, we have the opportunity going forward to understand, especially in specific areas, understand where we believe the latest trends are occurring and how we can help through our technical abilities to make a difference basically going forward. You know, when obviously, because of the whole scenario, the sustainable scenario, when we're looking at the energy transition, looking at the just transitions, it's not just about the environment. You know, there's the social aspect, there's the affordability aspect that we have to consider, especially in countries where there are energy intensive behaviors, where they are accustomed to low fuel energy prices, where they may have even a large quantity of fossil fuels, and they're required to actually, as professionals, you know, you have to tell them, well, we need to remove ourselves from fossil fuels and go to clean energy, but you have to find a balance that could work, you know, and that is why you always have to look at the big picture, which I referred to in the first slide, in terms of making that impact as a young professional within the industry. We have to be able, we might not have all the answers, but we have to be able to have an understanding of how the world is evolving, how it's changing, and what might be the different scenarios that we can expect and how we can adapt to them, which will bring me to my final slide. Next slide, please. So when actually looking at a workforce for the future, you know, young professionals will have to definitely be technology aware, you'll have to be flexible, and you have to be multi-skilled. What I see basically going forward is that, you know, it's not only about the technical aspect, but there's also the development of soft skills which are required to bring the transition to the forefront, because the technology keeps evolving. So we know that is one constant, but actually communicating your message to your leaders, to those in authority who may be able to influence decisions like policymakers, it'll be critical for us as young professionals to develop our soft skill set required. You know, the soft skills that we're looking at is communication, you know, in terms of how you present your work. You know, anytime you prepare, as my boss always tell me, every time you have to prepare me, I'll make it look appetizing. You know, I'll make it look inviting for people that they want to eat. And the same approach has to be taken with presentations, with articles that we write. We have to be able to target it in such a way that anybody can understand. It can be simple to understand, and it can be simple to interpret in terms of what are the actions required to move forward. In terms of negotiation, you know, negotiation is another key skill that will be required for the future, because this is where we will be able to negotiate and persuade certain viewpoints that we may have with our leaders and those in authority to make decisions. You know, as a young professional, we have to be able to stand up for our points and be able to, I wouldn't say argue, but is more along finding a common ground where they can see a different perspective from another generation that will be here when it's 2050. You know, some of us will still be working as professionals when it's 2050, and we have a role to play. You know, when you're looking at other skills, critical thinking, obviously is another skill that will be required, because we have to challenge the conventional business models that are there. You know, in certain systems that you may be in, it depends on which jurisdiction you're in the world, there are different systems, and some of the business models, because they are carbon lock-in due to long-term agreements, due to legacy systems, old policies, we as young professionals have to figure out, well, how we can get this mindset to change, how we could break down those barriers and be impactful, be meaningful, and bring change. And obviously, one other critical skill I want to really focus on is the skill of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is what is a critical skill when looking at, for instance, not only yourself, but those around you. in terms of how you lead people. Emotional intelligence is not only about your self-awareness, but creating empathy and self-awareness about others and their feelings. And especially that is very critical when you're actually in a team looking to produce results, looking to be impactful, looking to make a difference. You know, apart from not only looking at it from yourself and from others, but the relationship management aspect as well too must be under consideration. You know, what role would you play? Will you be playing an influencer, a coach, or a mentor? These are the things that you have to consider when you're in a particular situation. And these are some of the critical skills that, you know, you have to require. Being in a natural gas company, a national gas company, you know, one of the things that I did that was kind of out of the box was we launched a energy efficiency app. And the app actually utilized some of my soft skills because obviously you had to get buy-in from leadership because we are a natural gas company. However, we are launching an app looking at energy efficiency and more to electricity. And the whole idea is that in Trinidad, energy, especially for power generation and electricity, is over 95% natural gas. So indirectly, we are responsible for the energy intensive behaviors of the population. And we, as a company that's looking to become more green and improve in terms of our position, in terms of not only just looking at renewable energies, but the whole energy transition. You know, we factor in energy efficiency as a critical point and the behavioral aspect. You know, that is the first field because it doesn't make sense adding renewables onto a system with people wasteful behaviors. And we decided that, all right, the approach would have been to do an energy efficiency app. Now, I personally don't have a background in coding. I had an idea of the concepts I would have liked based on research. And this is where your whole team skill set came in because now you have to incorporate a team that we made up of people from IT, made up of people from CSR, make up people from marketing to come together, to work together. And you now have to lead this team. And as a young professional, you have to get people to buy into your vision. And this is where the whole, I just want to bring it back to the emotional intelligence aspect of it. You know, you have to get them to buy into the vision and to buy into the cause as well too. Because as young professionals, we need to work together to make a difference. We cannot work in silos because climate change is a global problem and we together must come up with global solutions, working collaboratively. And that is why I wanted to bring up the whole aspect of the app. You know, in terms of it, I was able to utilize some of these skills, these soft skills. And right now, you know, the app is available for our country. It's been launched within the Apple and Apple as well as the Android Google Play Store. And it's something that is a first for the Caribbean. And the app created a different dimension because the message for how we use energy has changed, and therefore the approach has to change as well too. And you know, we have apps for so much other things, whether it's ordering food, getting a drop from one place to another place, ordering stuff from online. So why not app on energy efficiency? And the app also provided that gateway because it's not just a simple energy calculator app. The app actually had 5 main functions where you can actually get energy saving tips. You can get access to resources on energy efficiency and clean energy. You know, you're looking at in terms of even to get energy efficient products. We created a component on the app where users could upload locations where citizens will know where they could purchase energy efficient products. And again, it's something new. It's something that I believe is the first for the Caribbean at least. And it's something that we're hoping to spark that change because you can't continue to do things the same way. And I like to say in closing, also a critical aspect of also becoming aligned for the energy transition is mentorship as well too. Seeking advice from mentors, finding a mentor within the industry is something I also want to advise as well because they will have that experience, that knowledge that you will not be able to get. Even sometimes you may read books, but they will have that experience dealing with people in certain circumstances that you could tap into and they could advise you and they could tell you. And, you know, it's something that we all, is something that's overlooked, but it's something that is required if you want to continue that succession planning for the long-term vision of a sustainable society and transition into the energy transition. So with that, I would just like to say thank you for allowing me to present, and I hope it was very insightful.
Thanks so much, Shane. That was a pretty fantastic, I guess, summary of all of the aspects of acquiring skill sets that are necessary to drive this transition forward. And if I may just make 2 points on what you said, the technology is constant, which is a really big point. It will continue to evolve, but soft skills are so important, and we need to make sure that we communicate the right message that we want the industry leaders to see, and also for the public, our communities, so that pressure can be added on to these majors who are responsible for making the proper decisions and changes to policies and even to their operations to ensure that we are on the right track to achieving our goals. And so as young professionals, as we seek to bridge this gap between ourselves and the industry, the way we can effectively communicate what we want to say is by staying informed and up to date with what is actually happening in the industry, which is a big part of making sure that we say the right things and we are part of the right agenda, and we're not just following blindly. And so finally, as you said, it's very critical that we realize that we cannot do this by ourselves. We have to work together if it is we want to achieve success in this massive undertaking of achieving sustainable energy for future generations and for achieving net zero by 2050. So with that, we'll move on to our final poll, which again, we will give our responses, see the results, and then we'll move on to our Q&A. And so I've seen that we have some questions coming into the Q&A box, which we will address shortly. Thanks again so much, Shane. So here are our results. And so we have some responses that said too slow, but the majority of our respondents have stated slow to moderate. So clearly we need to do some more work, I guess, on speeding up our transition. If this is the perception that we have and it is in any way reflective of what's going on in the industry right now, we definitely have some more work to do. And so do you think that young professionals have the right education for the future energy sector? And an overwhelming response of to an extent. And so I guess then the key takeaway from this is that while we may have the correct education, application is key. And as the speakers have shared, innovation and definitely the right motivations also. And so let's move on to our Q&A. So we have a couple of questions here in our Q&A box. I think the first one I can address is by Kevin. Are we doing enough fast enough to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as it is trending upward to date? And so I think one of the poll questions would have more or less addressed that. We're not doing enough. We need to move faster. from Masood Mohammed, we have, what are the strategies for encouraging young professionals to develop their skills in the industry? And I think this would be a good question for Mervin to address. So Mervin, would you like to answer this question?
Sure. So there are a couple of strategies, right? And of course, one of that is having this conversation, bringing this conversation to the fore, and making sure that young professionals are engaged in the conversations to understand what's happening, and then to be aware of the skills that they need to develop, you know, to prepare for that future, to participate actively in that future. But then obviously companies are also, you know, creating some sensitization for young professionals, getting them to be aware, creating opportunities for them to develop the skills. I've seen Google recently put out a website that allows young professionals to develop the digital skills that they would need to play a role in the energy transition. Schools are also changing the way they do things. They're changing their curriculum to ensure that you can, you know, come out of the university fully equipped to make the change that we desire to see, to actually drive the transition and make sure that we get there faster than we envisage, right? So there are a lot more, but I'll just stop at that.
Sorry, my mic was off. Thank you so much for your response, Mervin. So we have now a question from Will from the UK. In your experience as a young professional, what impact has the activism of climate groups had in promoting the low carbon agenda? And so I think, Shane, because you shared some of the statistics or trends rather for moving to 2050 from the IEA, maybe you would like to address this question.
So the impact of climate groups definitely is something that is ongoing, especially in terms of, you know, understanding, well, how they can sway policy makers to be more climate conscious and to be more climate adapt for climate change. You know, when you look at the groups in terms of policies, there are a lot of policies out there in terms of looking at carbon emissions, and also there's a lot of spotlights, especially climate activist groups. I know, like I believe it's Greenpeace, if I'm not mistaken, who protested, you know, in terms of against oil and gas companies to really take a serious put a serious spotlight on climate change. So they have been doing work, but it would require more than just climate activist groups. It requires everybody. And I think as young professionals, you know, we are in a prime position to really add to the work that's being done, you know, because it's going to take a collaborative effort moving forward to address climate change and to assist with aggressively pursuing the energy transition to meet that 2050 target that we're looking for. So they have been doing work, but it's just that they require more effort from other stakeholders involved in climate change. And, you know, I stress again on young professionals and even the end users, you know, people who use products and services. We supposed to be demanding more, especially understanding of where our products and services are coming from, how they were created, and we're supposed to stand up and say, well, we want it at this quality, we want more greener products, which is something that is being passed in certain societies in the world, obviously. And it's something that is being considered as well too, you know, in terms of influencing upstream or through the value chain, you could say, for products, in terms of rethinking, well, how they provide products to the end users.
Thanks so much for that response, Shane. And as we all know, public opinion definitely does affect how markets decide to do business in general. And so I believe that our voice is more powerful than we think, and which is why the Generation 2050 initiative is such a great one. I have a question from Stefan in Trinidad, and he says strong communities build strong countries. And so what are some community development initiatives from a sustainable energy perspective that you would recommend that young professionals get involved with, and how they can champion these causes? And so, Mervin, would you like to respond to that question, please?
So I think the community initiatives will depend on the country where you are, and I guess that there are a lot of initiatives currently being implemented and run in different countries. For example, in Nigeria, there's quite a number of things that the EI is doing to make sure that young people can be part of this conversation and can lead the transition. On a global scale, there is the World Energy Council with the Future Energy Leaders Program, engaging young people to be aware of what's happening, to have them, sit at the table and to contribute their opinions to the conversation, the dialogue. They also encourage to be active players in changing things and making things happen for the industry. So I'm sure you can very easily find out. One thing I always encourage young people to do is look out for the organizations that are supporting these courses, and then try to play a part in that. SP is also doing a lot of things to engage young people and help them to understand what's happening with the energy transition, creating opportunities for them to be mentored by leaders in the industry. So these initiatives are all out there. Just take some time to research them, and then take the action, the right action. Get involved and be willing to contribute. You just might have the idea that we're looking for. You never know. So don't keep yourself back. Don't hold yourself back as well. Just get involved.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Mervin. So I was reminded, as you said that, by something that the CEO of the Energy Institute, Louis Kingham, she always says it when we have our meetings. And so learning by doing is one of the biggest ways to learn and get things done, not sitting around waiting for things to get done. And so I guess for each person in their own local context, they would know what is going on around them. And so once we are aware and willing, we can act accordingly to champion certain initiatives that will affect and impact positively our communities, which would roll out around the communities in which we operate, especially when it begins to gain traction from stakeholders that see the positive impact that your efforts are making. And I think it is very key for us to not lose sight of that. Even the little things that we do can go a really, really long way with respect to contributing to this initiative. And so we'll take one more question, and this is from Muzaffar. And he says, one of the biggest technologies at the moment for oil and gas companies is to reduce carbon emissions through carbon capture, usage, and that should be usage and sequestration. Is enough being done to promote CCUS? And so Shane, would you like to respond to that one?
CCS has been a real interesting technology in terms of definitely oil and gas companies see it as a pathway forward, but I believe the issue is really commercializing the investment required for CCS. And that is something that they have been working on, and that's why a lot of companies have been advocating for putting a price on carbon, because it helps the economics for CCS projects going forward in terms of justifying that capex, So enough in terms of promotion isn't being done as yet, but it's still going on, in terms of CCS will have a role to play going forward, even making reference to the IEA path to sustainable development. CCS will still have a role to play because all technologies will have a role to play going forward. I mean, in the next 10 years and even probably 15 years, oil and gas will still have a big pie in terms of the global energy mix, and this is where CCS, and hopefully by then, based on policies that look at carbon emissions and pricing carbon emissions, come into play. It will help the technologies and the economics behind it become more commercialized and more accepted for companies to embrace that type of capital investment required for carbon capture, utilization, and storage. You know, one other thing I like to point out is also for methane leaks as well too. That is something as is affecting our natural gas industry. So it's not just carbon dioxide that we have to focus on, and methane, while it may only last, it might not last as long in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, it is more intense than carbon dioxide, and it's something that the natural gas industry is looking at in terms of how they can improve leak detections and also rectify, which is another way of looking at how we overall looking at the sustainability of that whole oil and gas sector going forward, basically.
Thanks so much for that, Shane. We did have one more question come in, which I would like for us to address, because I think it's also very important. And so Kadiri asked, in the emerging economies, I guess around the world, do you feel that the leaders are implementing policies to mitigate carbon emissions, carbon dioxide emissions? And how can young leaders, I think the question disappeared. Oh, so this was responded to by Mervin, so I'll just read her response while finishing the question. So how can young leaders push for more ambitious policies? And so Mervin responded, there's always room for improvements. As you know, so much more can be done. For young professionals, it starts with getting the right knowledge, get to know what policies are there today and what gaps are also there and how these gaps can be closed, and then I guess act upon those by acquiring the correct skill sets, some of which were discussed, both soft and technical. And that is how we will move forward. Yeah, we need to push, or rather urge, or even lobby, I guess, if I can use that word, with our own leadership in our respective countries, whether it be with industry or even our government ministries, so that they would know what we expect from them and what we want, the kind of future that we want to live in. And so that's it for our session today. Before we leave, I'd like to give a great depth of thanks and appreciation to our panelists for sharing their insight and knowledge. I know that we have learned a lot. And for those who are present and for those who will be seeing this session when it's posted on YouTube, I know that we will definitely, as young professionals, be very encouraged to go out and do more and make our voices heard and make the impact that we need to achieve sustainable energy for future generations, while also becoming the leaders that the industry needs for the future, for the betterment of our own countries, for the world, and our careers and families and everyone that will be affected by this. Because according to the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, there is no future with if it is we don't meet our temperature targets for our 1.5 degree Celsius above pre-industrial levels of global warming. So it's definitely a very important challenge for us to make sure that we do what we need to and we get the things right that we need to get right. And so that's what it's all about. Everyone has to put their hand in. If there was a plugin for diversity and inclusion here, which was shared by Steve Holliday, the president of the EI, he would have said that the need for young professionals in the future is so large that we need all the brains that we can get to put towards this initiative. Otherwise, we will not achieve our goals. And so there's a lot of work to be done. And so we need to do more. that is currently, more than that which is currently being done. And I believe that once we work together, we can achieve that. And so don't forget to take our survey, please. We really need for you all to make your voices heard. And so the link is in the chat box there. It should also pop up at the end. And so thank you for joining us. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Mervin. Thank you, Sinead. Thank you, EIYPN, and to all of our attendees. And have a great afternoon. And take care.